Recently, the chief exorcist at the Vatican reported that the devil was in the Vatican.
Morgan.
Wolf, Reverend Gabriele Amorth made headlines around the world recently when he said the devil was present in the Vatican.
You're talking about something very real, aren't you?
Certo, realissima. Dico, se credete al Vangelo, credete all'esistenza del demonio.
Absolutely, very real.
As to the devil's presence in the Vatican, he says that's no surprise. He once had to perform an exorcism on another exorcism.
The first thing we need to do if we're going to find out if the devil is at the Vatican is take a tour underneath the Vatican. As we arrive underneath the Vatican, we see that it is laid out in a number of rooms marked by letters, as we could see in this aerial view map. Now we will be exploring some of the rooms in this map. Let's start off by looking in room C here. As we look into the room, we see that this is a mausoleum of a Lucius Tullius Zethus. The Vatican goes on and explains that this room was used for offerings to the dead. We read, "View of the north wall and mosaic floor. In the corners of the mosaic floor there are 8 marble squares with circular holes through which offerings to the dead were poured during the funeral rites carried out in the burial chamber." So here we have a room where offerings are done to the dead. That's pretty common in Catholicism. Now if we look in the next room, room E, so here in this room they have a vase which has the image of a Medusa. So here underneath the Vatican we have a Medusa. Again, we ask ourselves the question, this is a vase, but yet it's kept underneath the Vatican. This could have easily been removed. If the Vatican was a holy church, you would think that they would have done this. You think underneath the Vatican they would have things that are sacred to Christ and not foreign gods, not idols and images of foreign gods. Now as we move down further to room H, here we see that this is a mausoleum that is one of the largest and most luxurious mausoleums underneath the Vatican of St. Peter's Basilica. It says that it was built at the beginning of the second half of the 2nd century during the reign of Emperor Marcus Aurelius and belonging to a freedman of the important Valeri family. And as we're in this mausoleum, we see that there's lots of idols from the old Roman Empire. We ask ourselves, why does Rome keep these idols down underneath St. Peter's Basilica? You would think if they were Christians, they would want to clean all this out. I can't imagine anybody who has a true church would keep idols in their churches, especially pagan idols left over from a bygone pagan era. But here we have the Vatican keeping many pagan idols underneath St. Peter's Basilica. Here is an idol the Vatican is displaying of a head of a child in gilded stucco and a lock of a hair typical of one initiated into the cult of Isis. And this particular idol is an idol of a boy who was initiated into the cult of Isis. If we look in this room, we see that some of the stucco decorating the walls. Here we have a personification of Oceanus. Remember, the New Testament book of Revelation says that a beast comes out of the ocean. And so we say, why is the Vatican having these foreign gods underneath its basilica? Why is it protecting them? If it was a true church, it couldn't be doing it for the sake of art, especially with all the evil things that are happening in the Vatican. And as the priest earlier said, that evil does exist, the devil is real, as he admitted. But the hypocrisy of all of this is that they have all these evil images and idols underneath the Vatican of St. Peter's Basilica. We also see 2 figures of genuses with bat wings also portrayed on the walls. Again, this is supposed to be a holy church and a holy place. Now this is supposedly all there for many, many years. As we move into the next room, room I, the details of the mosaic floor with Mercury and Pluto's chariot, they go on and explain that this theme is an explicit reference to the overcoming of death and the return of the afterlife. They describe it as a splendid mosaic floor of Mercury is depicted carrying a caduceus with wings at his ankles, walking in front, and a chariot carrying Pluto and his wife Persephone. So here we have all these Roman gods underneath the Vatican, images of foreign gods. Well, as we move to the next room, we find out why they keep all these idols down there in these images. As we move to room U, here we find the shock of all shocks. Here on the wall, it says there is a depiction of Lucifer, that is, the light bearer, the morning star. On the opposite of the wall, there is a drawing of Vesper, the evening star, cosmic symbol of the human life cycle. We find out that when we get to room U, here we have a clear depiction of Lucifer underneath the Vatican at St. Peter's Basilica. We ask ourselves, why are they keeping this image of Lucifer underneath the Vatican? Again, you would think if you're a Christian church, you would not want to have any of these images. Now we know that they'll go on and say, oh, well, we're saving it because it's a UNESCO heritage site or something like that. This is always their excuse, saving it for the sake of art. But for the true Christian, this is not an excuse, because we know if you're giving glory and propaganda to false deities and false pagan gods, what are you doing? You're in essence supporting the evil spiritual realm. This cannot be from God. And since Rome claims itself to be the one true church, you would think they would lead by example. But what kind of example is this? That you have a depiction of Lucifer underneath the Vatican for countless hundreds and hundreds of years? Now this image here underneath the Vatican has been there since their claim, which would be Constantine. We would know that he was the first one that built this basilica. And so again we ask ourselves, why are they keeping this depiction of Lucifer underneath the Vatican? Well, we think the answer for why all these images, idols, are kept underneath the Vatican is because what we're dealing with here is we're dealing with an apostate church that has always been apostate, and even now as it is filled with Freemasons. And so we know that the reason why they're keeping all of this there now, and they're actually revealing this on their internet website, is because they want people to see this. They want people to see what they're really all about. For the masses who believe that Rome is still a pure church, they don't mind deceiving them into believing that they are still a Christian church. As you go down underneath the Vatican, down into the next rooms, they will try to convince you on this tour that you take that Peter is buried down there in one of the rooms, and that this gives credence to following the Pope. But we ask the question, why would you want to follow a Pope who has all these evil things underneath his church? It's very clear by this depiction of Lucifer that the devil is in the Vatican. He's hidden way down underneath the Vatican at St. Peter's Basilica. Now, if you are a Catholic and you are watching this video, we want to encourage you to come out of that church. As you can see from these images and these idols that are kept underneath your church, we would hope that you would soberly think about these things and ask yourself the question, if my church is a true church, why is it promoting these things?
Been talked about as an act of God. The Vatican, struck by lightning on the same day Pope Benedict XVI shocked his cardinals by announcing his resignation. The frequently stumbling pontiff has long stayed off rumours of deteriorating health. In this instance, he's caught napping during a moment of sanctity while visiting the flock in Malta. Benedict began his reign as Catholicism's mitre-wielding man of cloth in his late 70s. He endured a broken wrist and a very public attack, giving rise to concerns that he may become vulnerable after suffering a stroke. Just recently, and perhaps another sign from God, the pontiff's dove of peace found itself flying solo against a wall. The symbol of harmony and purity was then set upon by a vengeful seagull, leaving the faithful questioning the mind of God. Perhaps the reign of Benedict is ending not because of his age or health, but because he simply didn't have the cool factor of the Pope who went before him.
They're creepy and they're kooky, mysterious and spooky. They're all together ooky, the Addams Family. Their house is a museum. When people come to see them, they really are a scream, the Addams Family.
Neat. Sweet. Petite.
So get a witch's shawl on, a broomstick you can crawl on. We're gonna pay a call on the Addams Family.
Blue Lodge degrees, went through York Rite all the way up to the Knights Templar Commandery, went through the Scottish Rite all the way up to 32nd degree, and at that time, then I was considered worthy to get into what is called esoteric Freemasonry, which most American Masons don't even know exist. And in that organization, I was admitted into the Rite of Memphis Mitzrayim, and I went up to a 90th degree, which a lot of Masons, if they even hear that, they will, their false teeth will fall out of their heads. But there are actually at least 97 degrees in the higher level esoteric rite.
Right. And were you surprised when you found that there were more than 33 degrees?
No, not really. See, here's how this works. When I went through the Masonic rituals, I had the spirit guides in my ear whispering things, telling me to do things, telling me to answer certain things in certain ways. Because I did that, I was identified by the leadership of the Grand Lodge of the state of Wisconsin that I was someone a little bit extraordinary. And see, that's one of the ways in which I ultimately got contacted by the Illuminati, is because the spirit guides had given me certain key things to say, key things to do, even gestures to make, stuff like that, that would identify me as being someone who was worthy of more light. You see, that's what they promise in all the Masonic degrees. They say, you get light, you get further light, you get more light. And of course, where does this light come from? Well, if you read the writings of the Masonic leaders, it comes from Lucifer.
And how many Masons know that?
Maybe 1 in 1,000, but most of them don't have a clue unless they bothered to toddle upstairs and read the books that are in their own Masonic libraries like I did.
How many Master Masons know that there are Satanists among them?
I'd say the same figure I quoted earlier, 1 in 1,000.
Right. Since Catholics are strictly forbidden to be Masons, why were you being asked to do two opposite things?
What people don't realize is that the Catholic Church helped start the Masons. And that, for example, the Scottish Rite, most of the degrees in the Scottish Rite were written by Jesuits. So even though there is this apparent antipathy between the Masons and the Catholics, to the point that up until John Paul II's reign, if you became a Mason, you were Roman Catholic, you were de facto excommunicated, just like that. But actually it's all a sham, because most of the high level of people in the Vatican are all Freemasons, and many of the people that are Freemasons are Catholics. It's like the old Hegelian idea, which he actually got from the Illuminati, of thesis, antithesis, synthesis. You have two opposing things, and they fight, and they come together, and they create and in this case, the idea would be to create a one-world religion out of these two opposites. The two things come together, and they merge. And that's actually happening right now before our very eyes. Because, for example, I don't know this, but I have serious reason to believe that the new Pope is in fact a Freemason. The old Pope who just died was a Freemason. The Pope before him was a Freemason.
How do you know
that? The Pope
that?
before him was not only a Freemason, but a Rosicrucian.
How do you know that?
Well, the Angelo Roncalli, who was John the 23rd, he was a member of a very high-level Rosicrucian Masonic order. There are records to that effect, and that's been documented in a book called The Broken Cross. I forget the author, but you can look it up on the internet, I'm sure. Paul VI, almost every one of those cardinals, those new cardinals, were Freemasons. Now, by inference, we can assume that he was probably a Freemason, but that's only circumstantial. When John Paul II was shot, he gave the Grand Masonic Hailing Sign of Distress.
Oh, okay.
Which is what Masons do when they're in dire straits. Also, John Paul II is the Pope who issued the bull, which is what, like a papal decree, it's called a papal bull, that basically removed the ban on Freemasonry.
Oh, okay.
Which is also somewhat telling.
Wow.
So the actual secret is that Masonry is a sex cult.
Wow.
And that's why they wear their apron over their Holy of Holies. Just like there's a veil in the Temple of Solomon that covers the holy place where the Ark of the Covenant is. Well, this is the Holy of Holies of the Mason. That's why Masonic monuments are obelisks. Like Washington's monument, the largest obelisk in the world. He was a Freemason. It's a giant phallic symbol.
It's all there for everyone to see.
That is what the Masons mean by resurrection.
Wow.
If you go to a Masonic funeral, they talk about the sure and certain hope of the resurrection. That's not, when they say that word, they don't mean what all the nice, Christian people sitting in their chairs think they mean. They're talking about the fact that the phallus dies and then rises again.
Hey guys, it's KJ from the Scariest Movie Ever channel on YouTube. And I have a video here covering a subject I've been wanting to cover for a really long time, but I was just waiting for that one piece. Well, it seems I found that piece just yesterday, so I kind of want to get into this here. Now what you're looking at right here, this is the Supreme Court building in Israel. And as you can see right there over on the left, that's an Illuminati pyramid with the sun symbol, or the eye, right there at the very top. It's a very common symbol that we all associate with the Illuminati, or the beast system, if you will. And here we find it on top of Israel's Supreme Court building. So I saw a video yesterday by a man named Paul Begley. Now, I imagine a lot of you that are subbed to me are probably subbed to him as well, just because we cover some similar subjects here and there. So Paul Begley is actually in Israel right now, and he uploaded a video yesterday where he'd actually filmed this pyramid on top of that building. So throughout the years I've been covering the subject of symbolism and the so-called Illuminati and all this. I've covered this for a really long time. I thought it was weird, man, and all the time I've covered it, this one somehow just kind of got past me a little bit. I've covered some things about Israel and the Illuminati, but never really went that deep into it. I've got a lot of pieces of the puzzle I've collected over the years, but this right here really set it in stone for me. So I wanted to do a video and just kind of cover a few things about this. It's a very, very important find. I did a little research online. I found about 4 or 5 years ago some people were talking about this and putting this out there. So it's not that this is exactly fresh, but I mean, as I said, even when I saw that video from Paul Begley, it was kind of fresh to me. I was like, whoa, and it really kind of struck me. So this was a really important catch as far as I'm concerned, and we definitely need to delve into this a little bit deeper. As I said, I've got some information on this stuff throughout the years, but seeing this video yesterday, it's like, okay, let's go ahead and dive into this some. It's important to understand that the same families who own and control the Federal Reserve and other major financial institutions have their eyes set on the Temple Mount and the holy city of Jerusalem. Just as the scriptures say, there's a man who will be revealed as the Antichrist, and he will sit there before the appearance of the Jewish Messiah, and many will receive him as their Messiah. And speaking of that, I've actually covered Dig, the TV series, in a few other videos, but it actually just concluded recently. But that right there was the whole idea behind this TV series, Dig. It was about establishing the Jewish Messiah. It was about these rituals they were doing at the Temple Mount to usher this in. They were performing these rituals at the temple that would essentially be Armageddon, the end of the world, and that would offer them the chance to bring in this Jewish Messiah. Even in the TV show, it was all about blood sacrifice. They were going to sacrifice this red heifer. As I said, I've covered that as well in some other videos. It's interesting to note, God wouldn't send men to that place anymore to perform blood sacrifices. His son's blood was the perfect sacrifice. So there's no need for us to shed the blood of dumb animals any longer. Yeshua did a perfect work, and remember, it was finished. What's kind of creepy and freaky about this is I do believe that the Antichrist, whenever it arrives on the national scene, it'll be accepted by most Christians as the Savior who can bring peace and safety, peace and order to the world. So ultimately, Jesus, Yeshua, will enter into that place, the holy mountain of God, and cleanse it. But before that happens, all hell is going to break loose in Jerusalem and the world. So with all that said, I want to explore a little bit more of this symbolism here at the Supreme Court. We'll even go inside some, and I just want to show you a few things. So this is a very, very touchy subject, and before I get into it, I just want to address a few things. It's not all the Jews, all right? I get this message on so many of my videos. It's like, why don't you ever talk about the Jews? It's the Jews, you know? So much hatred for that entire race. Now, I refuse to do that. Because what a lot of people don't understand is that all religions are controlled by the devil. All religions are of the beast system. Islam has the cube. Many of us know about the cube and understand the symbolism there. The cube going back to Saturn or Saturnalia, or ultimately back to Satan. So a lot of layers to that particular onion right there. But once again, this is a religion that is controlled by the beast, ultimately. Even in America, if you look at most churches, you know, because there's so many different denominations, right? All these different interpretations of God's word and what God's all about. Got all these buildings. But if you look at these buildings, and this is a typical example of most churches in America, if you look at these buildings, if you look right there in the lower left right there, they always have the pyramid with the sun in the middle, the sun symbol. This is why those lines are coming out. It's the illumination. Now, I'm not saying it's a bunch of Illuminati guys in black hoods, you know, built these churches or whatever. This goes back to the connection with Freemasonry and religion. And that's all fine and good, and I wouldn't really have a personal issue with it if it wasn't for the fact that Freemasons take oaths of secrecy. So basically, whatever's happening in the church, or they're saying in the church, or saying in public, could be very different from what they're doing and saying and working on in private. But on the higher level of the pyramid, the higher level of the Freemason structure, it's definitely much darker up there. So these are examples of, once again, what I call that beast system. Remember, it is the enemy that is in control of all of these religions. We don't need religion. This is where it gets tricky. Now, that's not to say that the people that go to church or the people that go to synagogue or go to mosques or whatever are all evil and bad people either. These are the sheep. These are the little lambs. There are millions of people on this planet that are controlled by that beast system through their very religions. And this is regardless of what they hold in their hearts. There are really good people that fall for this stuff. I mean, I see it in my own family. I was one. I was raised in a church myself. I was one. I was raised in a church in the Midwest myself, and I'm glad I was. It gave me a really good understanding of the basics and the fundamentals of religion and whatnot, but it wasn't until I personally left the church and started researching for myself that I really started to connect with the very real spiritual battle that's taking place in our world all around us, and the insane grip that this beast system has on all of religion and on people's hearts and minds. And I'm not saying, you know, don't go to church and this and that or the other. I mean, some people need that community. It's a good place to learn the basics and the fundamentals. I mean, the whole thing, right? It just didn't work for me. And I've been to pretty much every church you can imagine. I've got books on the Book of Mormon. I've got the English version of the Quran, Dianetics from L. Ron Hubbard, you name it. I mean, I've read about everything. I've been to a lot of different churches. I've mentioned in other videos I was actually in a bit of a cult in Maui. And there was no brainwashing. You know, they didn't get me an MK Ultra or anything like that. But the guy that ran it was a charismatic and really, really good with words. And it didn't take long for me to realize this guy was cuckoo. It took a few months. The point is, you know, we've all been deceived. We can all get pulled back into this beast system. So again, this is very touchy stuff. And I don't want anybody thinking this is anti-Semitic. Now, that's a big issue. This is what this Illuminati, if you will, these people at the top of the pyramid, have been hiding behind for decades now. Like, if you ever go against Israel or say anything against Israel, it's like automatically you're an anti-Semite. You know, you hate the Jews. That's all a psyop. It's social engineering. It's just a way to shut you down and keep your mouth shut. So once again, understand, I'm coming from a place of love. I see us all as brothers and sisters in Christ, whether people believe in that or not. That's how I see the world. The Supreme Court building sits on a plot of land next to the Foreign Ministry and the Central Bank of Israel. Now, it's important to note there's a lot of ley lines at play here as well. I'm not going to cover that so much here in this video. There's people out there that do really good work with that. There's a lot of things happening with the ley lines all around the Supreme Court as well. But that being said, it's important to understand that everything about this building has been thought out to the very finest detail. And I see it as absolutely diabolical. This is the devil's plan being put into place before we ever even realize it. The devil, knows its final battle will be here in Jerusalem. Now, if you're not familiar with the Rothschild family, please do a little research there. People always ask, who's the Illuminati? What do they look like? This is one of them. The Rothschild family is one of the Illuminati bloodline families. So it's interesting to note that the engineers who were chosen for this job by the Rothschilds were the grandson and granddaughter of a man who actually worked for Baron Rothschild. You also find their love of numerology all throughout this building and in the building process. It was important to the builder to have everything done according to the correct numbers. It's really interesting because all around the building you'll find these different pathways that you can walk through. And here's one right here. The larger circle you see at the bottom of the picture is actually an inverted cross. And this whole thing was designed for people to walk on. So this is actually a religious emblem placed there designed for people to trample on under their feet. So keeping in mind that we're approaching a one-world religion, okay, this is what's coming. This will be the beast system fully revealed, the Antichrist system. So this is why we find all the world religions represented in one way or another. For instance, right here, just beyond that Egyptian obelisk, lies a Muslim gravesite. Another thing you'll find all throughout the building and even out in the courtyard are multiple Hindu altars. And just in case there's still any doubt that the Rothschilds are actually behind this is one of the placards you find on the wall. The founder of the Rothschild dynasty and his 5 sons established all the central banks throughout Europe. The Rothschilds made several stipulations with the Israeli government before building the Supreme Court. And among them were that the Rothschilds would pick the plot of land to build the Supreme Court, they would use their own architects, and no one would ever know how much the building actually cost. It took them 4 years to build this structure with many secrets built into it. As I said, every element of this building was built according to occult knowledge. This right here is a great example. You find it right here that when you first enter the building, you actually find yourself on the journey. This entire journey is intended to bring one from darkness into the light and become an illuminated one. As you see here, when you very first enter the building, it starts off with dim lighting, but as you look up the stairs, you see the bright light that comes from a very large window that looks over parts of Jerusalem. It's also very important to note these steps here. There are 3 sets of 10 steps, making a total of 30. Now, as you ascend these 30 steps, you come from the darkness into the light. And from here you can see the world, or in this case the city of Jerusalem, like you've never seen it before. It's also worth mentioning that right here on the right side you'll see the old Jerusalem stone. Some even believe these same stones were used in the Second Temple. And on the other side you'll see the smooth modern wall. There are 6 lampstands going up that speaks to the man on his journey to gain his knowledge and become illuminated. But once again, I think it's very important to note that the ones who built this building built it to be, in their eyes, perfect and in their order of things, even numerically. And even right here, this is where we start getting a little bit deeper, but when you leave the center courtroom or the main courtroom, the base of the stairs you walk down, as you descend, you'll find the fertility symbol right there in the very center, which is always present in any of these so-called Illuminati structures. It's often kind of hidden, but it's always there. The symbol there in the center represents the woman, and then the, of course, staff, or whatever you'd like to call that, going through the center is the penetration. And speaking of that sign of fertility, we find it once again here at Wasilla High School. They actually made the statue a few years back, and this is Sarah Palin's territory right here. Once again, they're telling us that this is all about the, quote, warrior from within. Once again, alluding to the, if you will, female sexual organs, these signs of fertility. These things are often connected as well to the whole idea of goddess worship, and I've covered that in a lot of videos as well. So at this point, the term Illuminati is basically a catch-all phrase for the beast system, or the Antichrist system to come, the New World Order. There's still a lot of people out there that make fun of this symbolism. I see it all the time. I see a lot of really dumbed down things like this. You see this all the time online. Illuminati confirmed, you know, pyramid, right? Well, I understand that. Now, there's different reasons why people do this. Some people just don't understand what's going on. I think other people probably see it, but it scares them. So they want to put stuff like this out, you know, laugh at it, make fun of it, right? What these people are representing is this. It's the same symbol that we find on top of the Israeli Supreme Court building. The all-seeing eye with the pyramid, the beast system, the coming Antichrist system of the one world order to follow. If you really want to wake somebody up out there, I think this is a great example right here. You can show them this pyramid with the sun symbol or the all-seeing eye on top of the Israeli Supreme Court. Show them all the other symbolism that's taking place inside this building and around it. Show them all these celebrities that are doing the same symbol. Show them the movies, the advertisements, the TV shows. It's everywhere. This is something I cover on this channel extensively. So once again, folks, this is just another example of that beast system being our reality. The devil controls all of these religions and all of these governments on the entire planet. I know, a lot of people don't want to hear that. There's different names we can give it, you know, the this, the that, the whatever, but ultimately it is what it is. It's going to go down in Jerusalem. All eyes on Jerusalem. Right? So anyway, folks, that's what I've got for you now. I appreciate you watching the video. And as I said, use this information as a tool to help wake up others, all right? Help them to see past this dumb, you know, Illuminati confirmed stuff like that, okay? Show them the facts, show them the truth, and then let them figure out the rest for themselves. Because a lot of people want you to just give them the answers. But oftentimes when you just tell somebody something, they don't totally take it in. So lead them down the path, give them the tools they need, the tools necessary to find out more about this hidden reality right before our very eyes.
Imagine, if you will, a hidden dimension, a parallel universe, soon to be revealed by us through the veil, by the parting of the veil, by the people who work at CERN to reveal magical creatures entering into this reality, bringing forth the Antichrist. You have entered the Twilight Zone. This is Tim Clark with End Times Matrix News, and we have a special alternative reality show today with Chris, and we're going to be discussing all these rituals going on this side of the veil, trying to open up the rituals on the other side of the veil. And how are you doing, Chris, today?
I'm doing great.
Wow. This is really, really interesting. The things that we have been discussing, paralleling off of some of the nice feedback that our viewers have left on the previous shows. We were going to discuss today some interesting things. And I think we're going to start off with the new release by J.K. Rowling called Fantastic Beasts.
The wizarding world you thought you knew is much larger than you imagined. History has many secrets. The official story is never the whole story. Look beyond the surface, and you will find another world running parallel to our own. A secret world where magic is real. Ilvermorny, skinwalkers, the witch trials, and the magical Congress of the United States of America. These aren't myths, for the history of America is more amazing than you could ever imagine.
As you can see in this J.K. Rowling, her next venture outside the Harry Potter series, you're witnessing the revelation of a parallel society in the United States or North America that's this magical society that's been trying to direct what we would call the New Atlantis, the occult agenda of the New Atlantis, to bring in the Antichrist system. So we have J.K. Rowling releasing this movie in November 18, 2016. It definitely parallels with what we've been discussing with CERN. She's just really doing another revelation of topics such as Pandora's Box, also the Goosebumps series, where things come out of the books. This is going to be things coming out of CERN, the parallel universe. What do you think about all this, Chris?
Actually, this falls along with the Lord of Jubilees, in which the Pope just did at St. Peter's Basilica. The Lord of Jubilees is the Bennu bird, which is the resurrection of Osiris, which is the Antichrist to the occult as Horus. So we're looking at the Lord of Jubilees, which was called upon from the beginning of human history by witches, sorcerers, wizards, monks, priests, and alchemists since the beginning of time. And so we have CERN, which is alchemy machine, which is playing alongside of this ritual, which is very significant in history because Pope Francis called upon this jubilee out of nowhere, and it has to do with certain alignments. And we have this total solar eclipse.
Right, the one in Indonesia that's going to be witnessed in Indonesia. The Informed Christian video pointed out that it's significant connected to the spring equinox solar eclipse from last year, which was very interesting. So it's almost a signs in the heaven kind of bookend to an opening here of a time period that's taking us towards this Jubilee of November 20th. And this J.K. Rowling's release was November 18th, which parallels the release of these magical creatures. So again, we're looking at the opening of doorways to this other dimension. So Pope Francis, we touched on that in the previous video, the opening of the doorways at the Basilica, which was symbolic of the Janus, opening of the doors for warfare. We touched on in the last video. The spring offensives look like they're ready to go off in March. And of course, we had some nice folks leave us Dave Hodges and Steve Quayle's input that they believe there's going to be a quick escalation of warfare and violence and bloodshed, then a progression towards this Jubilees time period. I believe this Jubilees, doesn't it mark the 50th anniversary of the ending of Vatican II?
Yes.
And that's significant because Pope Benedict, if you didn't know, one of the more interesting pieces to Pope Benedict, coming from the Nazi background, and also he was the head of the Office of Inquisition that had a different name, but he was one of the members of the Rhine Group, which was the liberal German faction, is what they call it, that was putting down the traditions of the Catholic Church masses that had stood since 600 AD. So in 1960s, when the Vatican II happened and Pope Benedict was involved in this, he's instrumental in changing the Catholic masses and the liturgy and all this stuff, an attack on tradition. This is typical of the Illuminati methodology of taking down nation states and religion and things like that. So he was there, and this November 20th is the 50th anniversary of the ending of that. And this Pope was there when Pope Francis opened the doors and hugged him. And what ritual did we witness with that?
Pope Francis was wearing the Dagon hat, which is the god of Saturn. He hugged the other Pope, which is, I do believe we have two popes running things right now, the one that wears the gold, the one that wears the silver. Pope Francis signifies the moon, and Pope Benedict signifies the sun as he wears the gold, because this is a sun and moon ritual bringing them together for peace. There must be destruction before there is peace, and the Lord of Jubilees represents this rising of the phoenix. They actually started the Jubilee as a conception of when the Christ was put into the womb. When we know that their Christ is not our Christ. It is just symbolic to them of when they are wanting their Antichrist to be birthed. The phoenix is associated with the Hindu god Vishnu. We know that Vishnu is also Jupiter, and he's connected to Imhotep, which is the mother of Ham's wife. Ham was the first that did the stretching of the cord ceremony, which is the Jubilees. And we know that the Jubilees has to do with the rising of the star Sirius.
Yeah. And I think Canaan was the one that was cursed, who was the son of Ham, right?
Right. The Bin stone is actually named after the mound that was a sacred stone. This is in the Temple of Ra, which is Saturn in Heliopolis. It was the location the first rays of the sun fell, according to the Egyptians. It is the prototype for later obelisks and capstones of the Great Pyramid. So all of the obelisks we see, like in Washington, in the Vatican, all the obelisks that we see around the world, in Berkeley, California, these obelisks represent the Bin stone. It represents the stone in which the Bennu bird was standing on to bring the rays of the sun on the capstone of the pyramid to birth the Ogdode. From Orion is where the gate opens, and CERN wants to open a gate. CERN is a musical instrument. It has glass plates with words on them, with beams going through them.
Yeah, when you think about it, it's like having a sheet of notes up there and shining light through it. It's quite a complicated frequency and form type of old magic being conducted by CERN. I remember that Malachi Martin, the Jesuit priest, he discussed about the enthronement of Lucifer in the Vatican around the time of the end of the Vatican II Council. It was in the late 60s, and Vatican II, I believe, was around 65. And here we are having the culmination of this 50-year ritual being performed with CERN as the musical instrument, basically bringing this Apollo character or Nimrod character back.
Right, because it actually is a resurrected ritual.
Mm-hmm.
They are actually tricking people into thinking that they are represented in Jesus Christ with the Virgin Mary, when in all actuality, they are doing a ritual, because Jesus doesn't need to rise again. He rose, and the Bible says that. He doesn't need to rise again. Their God of the dead, which they worship gods of the dead, and we've proved this through our videos with the skull worship, with the double-headed eagle that Albert Pike wears also. He's a Freemason. It's called the 33rd degree of order out of chaos. And this has to do with the destruction and rebirth of Shiva, the destruction and rebirth of the Bennu, which is the Lord of Jubilees, which is the ritual that they started in December, which ends in November. It is the rebirth. It's the ashes and the rebirth of Osiris, which he is Horus as the resurrected Osiris. That's the black star. That's the star that David Bowie was singing about. And so we have all this ritual stuff going on. And not only that, we have Lady Gaga in her video actually shows a unicorn coming out of her. She is birthing a unicorn in this video, and it shows it coming out of the capstone. So this is actually a ritual that she's doing. And we know that Lady Gaga, her name means Pluto, which was the son of Saturn. Pluto is Hades. When Osiris died, he was killed by Set. He went into Hades as Pluto. The Bennu bird was the Ba, soul of the god Osiris. Some spells in the Book of the Dead aim to assist the deceased to transform themselves into Bennu birds so that they can travel freely between worlds. So we're talking about a parallel world, and the Bennu, which we know that Hermes and Thoth, Enlil, he was the one who transferred the souls of the dead from one world to another, as far as the occult world goes. I mean, this isn't transferring them to heaven, because these are gods of the dead.
Right, it's the gods of the dead with the Ogdoad again. Anubis, Hermes, and Pan, always guarding the gateways to the underworld. We're looking at this doorway portal opening, and what Chris and I have talked about previously is the use of CERN as a open sesame machine, an alchemy machine, a musical instrument that works off frequencies to open doors. And this is one of those interesting topics that I've always enjoyed, that takes us back to Pan and the flute and Mozart and the magical flute, takes us back to any of the old cartoons that you can remember where they play a sequence of keys on an organ and the sliding bookcase opens up. It's always about opening gateways, opening doorways, which is what this Jubilee seems to be related around with CERN and the opening of the doorway and the rolling out of the beast system.
We've talked about the rituals of Mars, which is the god of war. After the destruction will come in a new system.
Yep, and we also are talking about this false peace that's being brought in. This follows in parallel with the Jerusalem Post about Obama going to use the United Nations to divide Jerusalem. And we had talked about this in the previous year, but this article is out today and we'll include that. But again, it's Obama with splitting Jerusalem. Of course, anytime you split Jerusalem, this is symbolic of the end times devastations to those Gentile nations that come against Jerusalem and things like that. So he will bring destruction down on us by doing that, which is nothing new for Obama. Everything he does is designed to destroy the United States. And the LA Times just announced, according to Grindle, he had a very in-depth rollout of the beast system with the smartphones and the retinal identification to eliminate the credit cards and the pins, so that you have the biometrics of your retinal display with the smartphone. So therefore, the smartphone is on every person and it tracks every person. Police can locate you with your smartphone. Anybody can track you with the smartphone. Anytime you're using your MapQuest or any of those things, it says give up your location, right? So it knows where you are and it knows where you're going. It's the control grid of the beast system, controlling digital currency through biometrics and tracking every move that you make. And of course, as Grindle points out in his video, they can tax you anytime they feel like it, and they could take your money anytime they feel like it, because everything's digital. I think there was also a mention that Sweden says there's 5 years until cash is completely eliminated from their system. So it's going to be really interesting as we progress. Basically, the general thinking is that we're rapidly approaching hostilities in the short term, but that the CERN events and the completion of the Antichrist rituals connected to CERN are supposed to occur according to these rituals around. And again, this is not date setting. This is just following their Jubilee numbers that they're laying out. It seems that from the close of the Vatican II Council to the 1120 is the 50 years. Of course, they're doing their Bennu bird rituals and their solar rituals and their lunar rituals, marrying of heaven and earth. The point that we're making in this video, of course, is the parallel reality that exists that we've uncovered during these end times through the waking up process, revealing the occulted, hidden world of Lucifer and his minions and disguised rituals of the pseudo-Christian, the fake Christian churches enacting these rituals in front of everybody as Christian rituals of some sort, but they're actually Roman pagan rituals that are designed to bring in the establishment of the Antichrist and the beast system that we've been talking about. And we're going to continue to follow this topic, of course. It just seems that we get so much on our plate every day that we could just continue to add video after video on these topics as new, crazier things are revealed in these end times. We'll stay on top of this and we'll keep bringing out these things as long as we're able to, right, Chris?
Right. I just wanted to say, too, that in reference to the Bennu and the Ben stone, Enlil was the god of Nippur, and his throne was the ziggurat. And what they would do, the people would have to speak all one language in order for him to come down for his power. That is what CERN is doing. It has all the languages on glass plates, calling this Bennu, this Lord of Jubilees. This is why the Pope did this Jubilee ritual in order for the phoenix to rise, and this is why war is coming. The elections are going to be in November. Well, this is the end of the Jubilee. This is when the Romans would announce a new emperor at the end of the Jubilee. This is what they're doing for their new king. We don't know if this is when the Antichrist is going to come down and the portal is going to open, or if this is just something that they're doing in order for the 10 kings to come together to gain its power and for people to get the mark of the beast before the Antichrist comes. This is just things that we're watching that is coming into play that we're trying to explain in the end times according to their ritual and their gods, which they're tricking. 10 million people will walk through that basilica.
It's amazing, this ritual. It is ritual when you're watching what the Vatican is doing, just complete ritual, bringing in the Antichrist system.
Right, the New World Order that was spoken of. Pope John Paul II, when he kissed the Quran, and he called in for a New World Order. Then we have George Bush Sr. calling in for the New World Order.
As a real skull and bones man would call in for the New World Order, because that's their only job. Him and John Kerry and any other skull and bones out there, that's their job.
That's right. And this is what they want to do, is raise their skull and bones Antichrist from Orion. The end of ancient is marked by the entrance of Alexander the Great in 322 BC, skull and bones number. So the end of the ancient Jubilee was marked with war, destruction, and rising of a new king.
Destruction is definitely a part of it, whether it's financial systems or world systems. Again, the Jubilee, according to the biblical Jubilee, was supposed to bless those who followed the Jubilee and be a blessing. But when you don't follow, it becomes a curse. We're going to see the curse side as far as everybody being knocked into this beast system at the end of this Jubilee.
Right. The Jubilee year is the year at the end of the 7 cycles of the Shemitah, and according to biblical regulations, had a special impact on the ownership and management of the land in the land of Israel. This is spoken of in Leviticus. Jubilees has to do with the rising of the Nile, the 7-year Shemitah, and Orion, where the gate is, represents Shiva too.
Absolutely.
So Shiva represents 7, and in the old ancient calendars, you see Shiva doing her cosmic dance with the sun and the moon to open the gate of Orion during the rising of Sirius, the star. That's the black star that David Bowie is talking about, that is representative of Saturn, because we know Saturn fell, Samael fell. And after that, after the flood, and the resurrected Osiris represents Jupiter as the sun then, the king of the gods in the cosmic sky. So this represents the Ogdoad. Now we are going to have the phoenix rise again. This is what the Pope is doing the ritual for the Jubilees that's ending in November of 2016. And this is actually the month that Matthew Nicholson says that World War III will begin. And he maps it out in his videos and calculates it with the spin of Saturn, with all of the calculations of Saturn, with all the rituals that they have done in all the presidencies. Everything calculates to Saturn. It's a Saturn ritual. That's why the Pope wears the Dagon hat, in reference to worship of Saturn. In these priesthood that actually behind the scenes, they are a huge occult of Saturn.